All right, thanks, Emily. So, welcome everyone. Thank you this morning, afternoon, evening, wherever it is there, or whenever you're watching it in the future. So, how this came about was a couple months ago, out of the blue, I got an email, and the email was asking me if I would be interested in coming and giving a presentation to the actual heads of security, the CSOs, the CISOs, the global heads of BP, for a lot of Fortune 100 and a couple Fortune 500 companies. And the topic they were interested in was on starting up an OSINT program in the organizations. I thought, shoot, that sounds like a lot of fun, and I have a lot of strong opinions on that. So I went and did that last month. That was a really, really good time. And afterwards, after it was all over, I kind of made a post on LinkedIn mentioning, hey, I got to go do this today. It was a good time. And I got a few questions on that. And I thought, well, there's no reason why I can't do a webinar on this, right? There's nothing proprietary, nothing sensitive in that slide deck. So thank you very much for Emily and Sands for kind of helping set that up so we can give this webinar today and kind of talk about it, right? Real world OSINT advice for the current changing landscape. And we'll talk about what I mean by current changing landscape in just a second. So Emily gave me the short little intro right there. Over 21 years of federal law enforcement experience. I literally just retired last week. So it is that recent, kind of that fresh. I still hasn't hit home quite yet. I founded multiple OSINT units. I've been a certified SANS instructor for about 6-7 years now. I've consulted with multiple Fortune 500 companies, right, from teaching in SANS, other things I've been doing outside of the government as well as within the government. I spoke at Black Hat this previous year. I got featured in Wired. But also, when it comes to dealing with the private sector, I really kind of cheat. And what I mean by that is my wife actually used to run cyber threat intelligence for a Fortune 100 company. She's still the senior director there now. So I have a very, very good insight into both kind of OSINT and what that looks like from the government side and also from the private sector side in the form of cyber threat intelligence and other fields as well. So the agenda, we'll talk about the changing landscape, what that looks like, best practices for starting an OSINT team, a little bit about OPSEC, like what truly matters, and then maybe if we have a little bit of time at the very end, persistent monitoring, just very quickly. So the changing landscape, right? What do I mean by that? And that's the type of thing that you can throw out there and it's just like a buzzword. You just like threw it out there, the changing landscape. You're trying to scare people to get them to come watch it, right? But it's true, and I've seen this happen over the course of the past several years. And historically, if we sit down and we're having drinks, whatever, kind of hanging out, talking to people about OSINT, we tend to think of what people's job titles are as very closely aligned with the style of work they're doing, right? And historically, law enforcement investigations, targets, right? An individual or a small group of individuals, usually short information about this individual or group. And now let's try to go, disrupt that organization, arrest them, do whatever we can, right? It's more of a less technical, more focused on individuals, groups, things like that. Intelligence agencies, we think of it as a little more kind of long-term and holistic a lot of times, right? Instead of maybe necessarily targeting a specific individual, maybe you're targeting an entire country, right? Or an entire region or an entire industry, and just really kind of tasked with knowing what's going on there at any time to be able to answer questions, right? So I think a lot of times with intelligence, we think about it as kind of a similar to law enforcement, like I said, a little more long-term, a little more wide scope. Private sector, OSINT, we kind of think of cyber threat intelligence units for private companies, right? And that's understanding what the top threats against their company would be, right? What are other companies in our same industry seeing as threats, right? Who's likely to be targeting us, right? How do they usually do things? What can we look for, right? Everyone talks about that defense should be informed by intelligence, right? That's a very, very common thing when you're reading business or leadership books, but what does that actually look like, right? And a lot of times that's cyber threat intelligence trying to actually make that happen, right? Trying to figure out what are the most likely threats against us, what would this actually look like, and now what can we do to try to mitigate that, to stop that, to detect that on our end, right? Traditionally, that's been the cyber threat intelligence role. And if we think of these OSINT roles as colors of paint, right, people would picture like nice orderly buckets, right? Here's what a CTI analyst does. Here's what a law enforcement analyst does. Here's what this, and all the way down the line, right? Here's what recruiters do. Here's what this field, private investigators does. And we picture that on the left. But what it actually looks like in real life, and especially for the past few years, it is very much what is on the right, right? This is just all mixed up together, right? And what do I mean by that? I see law enforcement analysts with very little technical training, right? And it's no fault of their own that all of a sudden they're doing things like looking at IP addresses, trying to determine, well, is our adversary located in Germany? Or is it just someone that's using a VPN or a proxy or a Tor browser or something like that, trying to manage their attribution and hide where they're truly coming from, right? More and more, you're seeing, once again, law enforcement people, and it's no fault of their own, they just really haven't received the training to be dealing with some of the things they're coming across right now. I remember several years ago, there was a small municipality and there was two detectives there, and they were just normal detectives. But when the municipality wanted to add a cellular forensics capability, right, a digital forensics capability, they sent these two detectives on training. And so they went like, the 1 week, 2 week course, got trained up on that to pull data off phones. And now all of a sudden, well, they're the technical people too. And I remember because they were coming to me with help, and what was going on was there was someone in that area who was running a daycare, right? It was a female that was running a daycare center, and she had had a breakup with her ex. And now her ex was hacking the website of the daycare center and posting up highly inappropriate information. And that was legitimately damaging to her business, obviously. And these detectives, they were called to investigate it. It's a real crime. There's absolutely a real victim. And God bless them, like, once again, through no fault of their own, they weren't dumb by any stretch. They just didn't have this technical experience or training. They had no idea what to do. And they were like trying to reach out to other people for help. And like, they're like, oh, well, look at the logs. And they're like, what logs? Like, we literally have no idea what you're talking about, right? And that's just one example. And we see this in OSINT too, but we always try to, and for years I've gone around for the U.S. government teaching OSINT at a variety of different locations across the country, and then several other countries as well. And I always try to take the time to explain how technical things work, because even if you think that your job isn't doing a lot of technical duties, understanding how things work is very important, because what that's going to save you doing is running down rabbit holes when you're doing research like this. And on the flip side, right, what about people that technically, their jobs are doing technical stuff, right? Cyber threat intelligence, right? They're not worried about law enforcement type of stuff, right up until the point when they are, right? There was at the 2020 SANS OSINT Summit, I released a code and gave a talk on persistent monitoring using Twitter, right? And it was just this free kind of simple tool that I wrote, and I posted the code on GitHub, and it was designed to 24/7 monitor Twitter for a specific set of criteria. And I had some different rules and some different logic in there. And if an alert met the criteria that it thought was important, it could fire you an email notification. And I wrote that for law enforcement, right? I wrote that for me, basically, to use to replace the functionality of like a six-figure commercial tool that we no longer had, right? And it basically did replace the functionality, frankly. During 2020, during periods of civil unrest in this country, I am aware of at least two Fortune 100 companies that were running that code. And what they were running that code for was trying to monitor, can their employees safely enter or exit a building, right? I remember hearing like, yeah, we got people that say they just got off the subway, but they don't think they can get inside the building safely. And vice versa, people that are inside the building that really don't think that it's safe to leave the building, right? And so little things like that, and cyber threat intelligence analysts that are handling this, and all of a sudden, right, they're almost basically doing a law enforcement type of role. Also threats against executives, right? And just certain sensitive data leaking out there, executives' data getting hunted out there and posted on places like DocSpin, and then these CTI analysts trying to run it down. Okay, can we find any information about who posted this? Someone made a threat against one of our executives. Is this actually credible? Do they have the means to execute out on this, right? Once again, these people that were hired to do a technical role, and all of a sudden now they're basically doing kind of a law enforcement, right? And so that's what I mean. These are all blending together. And why does this matter, right? Because it's absolutely happening. I've seen it from both sides, from both the government side and from the private sector side. And it's more important than ever to be well-rounded. Frankly, that's really kind of what it boils down to, right? Just having a good, well-rounded skill set and a good, diverse team. Right. So you see there, it's more important than ever to have a team with diverse backgrounds, right? And understands what may be needed in the future and is prepared to meet those needs, right? It's usually better to follow an established playbook than to make it up under pressure. I was at the Marine base at Quantico last month, and I remember I was driving by towards the FBI Academy Park, and you drive right by the long range rifle base. And I was reminded of a story years ago when I was younger. I read a book on Carlos Hapkaka, a famous Marine sniper from the Vietnam era. And in there, he talked about one of his final missions that he was on. He was by himself and he was out here for a couple of days. And he was getting close to the point where he was going to try to get to take his shot. He had laid out a plan. I'm going to go in there. It's going to take a couple days to get here, but I'm going to get to this exact point, and then I'm going to take a shot on my target. And after about 2 days, he was close to the point, but not there yet. And he starts thinking, I'm not that far. Like, I've made this shot so many times. Like, why don't I just take it from here? Right? I'm close. Why don't I just take it from here? I've done it before. I can do it now. Let's just take it from here. And having this internal dialogue and debate with himself of, listen, you have not slept in 2 days. You have not eaten in 2 days. You are exhausted. You are a mental train wreck. Why are you going to deviate from a plan that you laid out when you were well rested, well fed, somewhat relaxed, and you came up with that plan when you were thinking straight? Why are you not going to bail on that plan for a plan that you just came up with when you were a mental train wreck, right? And trying to have that internal debate with himself. And it's true. It's always better to kind of think up what we need to do in the situation before the situation occurs, right? Because we're thinking clearly. Sometimes tempers, right, aren't quite as fired up. Sometimes you make a little bit of a rash decision. And that doesn't mean that you might not have to deviate a little bit from what you had already laid out, but that's fine, right? We can document that deviation and why we chose to deviate it. But everything we can think up in advance and try to prepare for this is going to help us when the time actually comes. So that's what I mean by the changing landscape, right? What's out there. Now let's talk about actually what the purpose of the main talk was, right? Best practices for starting up an OSINT unit. I've started up multiple OSINT units, both at like the kind of the tactical field level and at the agency-wide headquarters level. And I don't just say this as lip service. Both times, right? Both times, some of the very first meetings I had were with legal department, right? At the headquarter level, the privacy department. And it was always very, very important for me. And thankfully, I know he sees there, I never warranted a full-time U.S. attorney, right? I was pulling shady stuff, but not that shady. But I deserved to have an attorney whose full-time job it was to answer my questions, certain things like that. But what I made sure that I asked for and received was, listen, I don't want a lawyer full-time. I don't deserve a lawyer full-time. It's a very frankly finite resources. But what I do want is I do want 2 attorneys, right? Because 1 is none, 2 is 1, because people have vacation, people have other things going on, people get sick. I want 2 attorneys who basically had my unit as one of the responsibilities as a collateral detail. And what I mean by that is, as the unit was forming and we were figuring things out, then I was a little more demanding of their time, right? Hey, can you please look at this? Hey, can you please help me decide this? But then once the unit was going, I didn't really need a whole heck of a lot from them, right? But they understood who I was, and they understood what I was doing, what I was allowed to do, why I was allowed to do it, all of these types of things. Why is that important, right? Why is it so important to have basically a pre-existing relationship with a couple of attorneys instead of just calling the duty pager, right? This is a picture, one of the only panoramas I've ever took on my iPhones years ago. This is from the back room that was under construction at an international airport. And I received a phone call one day and they said, hey, it was from another agency than the one I worked for. Can you get to this international airport, which it was basically the travel itinerary was basically, you kind of need to go get your stuff and leave right now. And we'll set you up in a back room. And we've got a target that's going to be landing in that airport in the very near future. And when they land, we would like you to get the information you can off their electronic devices. But you're only going to have about 5 minutes to get everything you can. Okay, what kind of devices do they have? I don't know. And this was kind of like a crazy, crazy type of, but you need to leave now. Just grab your stuff and kind of go. And at that point, you're like, wow, this is kind of really weird, a little surreal. Well, first thing I want to do is let me call my lawyer real quick. Hey, this is who called. This is what they want. Are we cool? And the lawyer's basically like, yeah, I have no problem with that. Just make sure you do this and don't do this. Yeah, roger that. Thank you. Let's go. And I was able to take off, and actually it was a very, very successful operation. It was pretty cool. Imagine if I had had to have that conversation with just a generic duty attorney. If I had just called the pager, called the number, and gotten whoever happened to be on duty, I can't even imagine, right? Who is this again? What unit are you on? What do you do? Okay, what's your name again? It would have been half an hour of just sitting there, like explaining what we do, right? But by having that kind of pre-existing relationship and being able to, oh, okay, yeah, I know what's going on here. Yes, this is fine, right? Very, very important. Very, very important. Right? It's important to work with legal and develop policies and SOPs, right? Standard operating procedures for OSINT work, but try not to put more constraints on your team than the law does, right? Than the law does. This is important from like a policy perspective. One thing that I have heard, one of the most common complaints over my career, traveling around all over the place and working with people both inside the government and out, is complaints that their organization's policies were too restrictive on what they did. And one complaint that I would hear a lot is, I am not allowed to do X at work, right? I am not allowed to log into Facebook and research this person at work, but my spouse can at home, right? There's nothing illegal about what I want to do. It's just forbidden by policy, right? And sometimes that's very, very justified, right? Policies are there for a reason. Laws are there for a reason. There's certain constraints that need to be in place. But we want to think long and hard before we put more restrictions on our team and what we're allowed to do than the law does, right? And what are some examples of that, right? Why am I saying that? Well, the top one we're going to look at right here is violating terms and services, right? This is, if I'm going to go research someone, right? Like Emily, who gave me the nice introduction here, this morning today. If I look at her Facebook page today, and then I look at her Facebook page tomorrow, and I look at her Facebook page next week, I am absolutely more likely to appear as someone she may know, right, on Facebook. And if she's my target, right, if she's a criminal and she's my target and I'm law enforcement, I don't want that, right? And so then it's like, okay, well, yeah, just use a Facebook account using a fake name, right? Make a separate account using a fake name. That's what most people do. Technically, that violates Facebook's terms of service, right? Facebook says you're allowed one account. It's got to be your real name. That's not okay. And most places say, yeah, we're violating the terms of service, but we don't really care. We have operational security reasons that we're doing this. So we're just going to kind of go forward and do it. But there are some organizations that are not allowed to do that style of work because they have put in their company policy, we are not going to violate the terms of services on these sites. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying what it does is it severely hampers the research operations in the future, right? When they need to go look at someone on Facebook, but they're not allowed to. So now it's kind of like a blind spot. And one of the reasons why I get so fired up about this topic is a lot of times it's not a blind spot because we get people that are told, just make it happen, right? Just do it anyway. And this is where things can get so scary so quickly, right? And I've seen people that are working for an organization They're saying, hey, I want to be able to go to Facebook. I want to be able to go to, I'm just using Facebook being generic. It could be any site, right? I want to be able to go to these sites and make accounts to research people. Sorry, our policy says no, because I'm going to be violating the terms and services. Okay. But now something happens, right? Something gets posted that the company thinks is very, very important, right? Potentially damaging, potentially dangerous. Some sensitive information is posted there, and they tell this person, well, we'll go find a copy. Okay, but we don't have to just do it, right? Just make it happen. Well, now what's going on? Now that person, God bless them, there's a good chance they're going to be sitting there, possibly on their own machine, possibly using their own account to go there and try to answer this question, right? And so all of a sudden things kind of like fly out the window sometimes when it's really, really important, right? And so that's now, let's take the time and let's do it right. So like I said, there are many organizations that say we're not going to violate terms and services. Just realize how much effectiveness in the future you're giving up by making that decision, right? And maybe having to talk with legal, like, I am not a lawyer. I cannot give legal advice. I've spoken to many lawyers on this topic, even some that I would consider extremely conservative, and they haven't had a problem violating terms and services, right? So I can't tell you it's no big deal. I truly, truly can't, but just have that talk with the legal and don't just blindly accept we're not going to be able to do it. Breach data, another biggie, right? I heard a OSINT expert recently say that they would never consider using breach data because it's stolen property, and they don't see any difference between using that and buying stolen property. I understand that point of view. I truly, truly true. I disagree with it personally, right? And it's because, once again, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've been involved with a lot of different things. And you've seen there are times when it's kind of critical. It truly is, right? Early 2020, there was a web server down. It was a small web hosting company down in the southeastern part of the United States. And they had gotten a contract, and they were hosting a lot of law enforcement websites for training for a certain law enforcement organization. And there was different trainings that they were kind of hosting that these organizations are putting on for law enforcement. So law enforcement people from across the country were registering for these trainings, and their information was on this web server. That web server got popped, and the information got posted online. It was referred to as Blue Leaks, and it was 269 gigabytes of data of law enforcement information from these servers. 269 gigabytes. That is a lot of text data, right? That is not video. That is not things like that. That is text, PDF, Office documents. That is a ridiculously large trove. It was very, very difficult to download because there was a torrent available, but the file was so large it was breaking virtually every BitTorrent client out there. And very quickly word got out there of, listen, do not download this data because there's malware in it, which there kind of was. The attacker basically left the files that they put on there to get a foothold in the system. They kind of left those on with the rest of the files, and that's what was scanning as malware. So you had a file that was very difficult to download in the first place, and word on the street was there was malware in there, which there kind of was. And so across the country, there was law enforcement agencies that wanted to see what their exposure was, right? Who of our people are in there, right? Their personal information, their work information. We want to let our people know, but we either can't download this or we don't feel safe downloading this, right? I downloaded a copy. I literally could not count how many law enforcement agencies I told them what their exposure was. Hey, just let me know. Okay, I'll get back with you and I'll let you know. So I was using the breach data for a purpose that I think was very, very good, right? And I think most people would agree, oh, okay, in that case, I have no problem with it. Qualys, the company that makes vulnerability scanners, they got popped last year in 2021, right? And word broke that, hey, Qualys got popped, and there's actually customers' vulnerability scans on the dark web. Think about that. If you have a vulnerability scan for your network, that can basically be kind of like a blueprint, right, for an attacker to just follow. Like, here's basically the test key, right? Just follow this game plan laid out in this nice PDF report, and you can just sit there and, kind of take over this network. And it turned out the data wasn't that big of a deal. But once again, multiple organizations reached out to me. Hey, we heard this. Can you get a copy of this data and let us know what the exposure is? That to me seems like a very, very worthwhile and very justified thing to do, right? I have used breach data when I have had organizations reach out to me. I remember when the MGM leak, the data kind of from the MGM, their customers leaked out there. I got a call from the Fortune 500 that day saying, hey, we have some executives that we think have their data in there. Can you let us know what of our executives' data is in there? That seems like a legitimate purpose, right? I've used breach data to help in cases of law enforcement, the government with legitimate national security implications. And so from my experiences, right, there's a time and a place to do this. There really is. So if you want to limit it, that's fine. But once again, kind of realize what you're giving up, right? These are just certain policy decisions that we need to think about. Visiting the dark web. I visit the dark web to grab a lot of data for organizations that don't feel comfortable doing it themselves, or they're not allowed to by policy to do it themselves, right? It can be done fairly safely, right? It just, once again, take the time, try to figure out what you need to do in advance, not under the gun, but be very, very careful restricting your people from doing this, because it's going to limit your effectiveness in the future. And it may limit your effectiveness at a very, very basically a time when you wished it wasn't. Right. If the scope of your team's research activities is going to include looking at employees, make sure HR is involved, right? We always want to, anytime we're looking at internal employees, human resources needs to drive, right? Even if we're the ones who are physically kind of keys in the keyboard doing the work, it is basically HR is directing us what to do, right? We just want to be very, very careful with that. Let's talk a little bit about OPSEC, right? Operational security. It is the most challenging topic to discuss in OSINT. It just really, really, truly is. And it's because it means so many different things to different people, right? Different people with their different targets, their different scope of works have drastically different needs, right? Drastically different needs. And even sometimes trying to define what OPSEC is, right? I personally look at it as a risk management. And as with anything, right, you're never going to completely eliminate the risk. All you can do is try to reduce it, to mitigate it. At the end of the day, whatever's left, you got to accept it. But most importantly, I always like to use the analogy of OPSEC is a spectrum, right? My wife gets full credit for making the graphic on this slide right here. On the very left of this slide, we have absolutely positively no OPSEC whatsoever, right? This is people using their own personal computers, their own personal accounts to do research, everything. It is not a good situation, and everyone knows it, including the people who are doing it, right? They just may not have a better alternative, and they're just trying to get the job done. On the very, very right, we have the best OPSEC money can. I remember one time a buddy of mine, he was working at cases years ago, going after one of the anonymous hackers. And what they had done is they had rented an apartment in a fake name. They had a fake business. They had rented an apartment in that fake name. They had an internet connection there with a fake name, obviously, once again. And they were tunneling their traffic through there. And then from there, they had two VPNs. Two different VPN connections. They were going from VPN 1 into VPN 2, and on the first VPN that they were connecting into, they had basically a source, right? They had a friend that worked at that company, and they were going to give them the heads up if anyone was kind of poking around trying to figure out who they were. That is a ridiculous level of operational security, but against that target, you can say that it was absolutely warranted and justified, right? The problem is when people think that that's what they need to do for the type of work they're doing. One of the reasons why OPSEC is so difficult is this is one area where a lot of experts give a lot of bad people, I think, not the best advice, right? And I've seen it happen. I've been to like a conference and you see someone who recognizes like, oh, this person's like a big name in OPSEC, right? On Twitter or whatever. They go up to them, hey, I want to break into OSINT, I'm just getting started. What do I need to do? I want to make sure that I'm doing it safe. And it's like, oh, you got to use this, and 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 you got to do a VPN, you got to do this, and you got to do this, and all of these different things. And then they're like, oh, wait, I see another friend of mine. Okay, talk to you later, bye. And they leave. And they leave feeling like they just helped that person out. But that person feels like they just got hit by a Mack truck, right? I cannot give you 30 things to do. That is not how the human brain is wired, right? If I've given you 30 things to do, frankly, I've given you nothing, right? There's just a few things to focus on, right? Let's focus on the big, most important things. Let's knock those out. Then if we want to improve from there, then we can improve from there, right? It's a process. But when I think about this as a spectrum, right? Once again, we're back to no OPSEC on the left, the best OPSEC money can buy on the far right. We're not going to get to the far right, right? For almost all of us in our careers, we're just never, ever going to get there. And that's okay, right? Because if you look at the purple marker right there, right, we can get close for easy and cheap, right? For fairly easy and fairly cheaply, we can get very, very close to that. And that's good enough for what most of us are doing, right? It truly, truly is. We understand it may not be perfect, right? There might be a little bit of risk left, but that's okay. We just kind of accept it and go on, right? We want to be very, very careful. Like Voltaire said, perfect is the enemy of good, right? We want to be very, very perfect or very, very careful, excuse me, that just because something is not perfect doesn't mean that it's not worth doing. It can absolutely be worth doing, right? 4 things that are all useful but not perfect, used in conjunction, can leave us so much better off than we would be if you weren't using any of those 4 things. That's a very, very important concept to remember, frankly, in all things information security, not just OPSEC, right? So we can get there, but it's that mindset of, oh, there's something that I hate, and I imagine a lot of you hate it too, and I don't use the word hate lightly, is someone who in a meeting will just want to point out flaws with an idea without having any ideas of their own. And it's okay to point things out. I have no problem with that, but let's not be an obstructionist, right? Just because something is not perfect doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Let's reduce this risk as much as we possibly can. And at the end of the day, we either say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable with a little bit of risk that's left, we're not going to do it, or I accept the risk that's left and we're going to go forward, right? But you kind of made an informed decision, right? By understanding how things truly work, that's really the only way you can make an informed decision on if it's safe to continue doing what you're doing. And doing things safely is very, very important. When I used to teach OSINT for the government, I had all these like fancy tools that I built for, Twitter or Facebook or other things that were doing all this cool analysis, and everyone wanted to come see those. That's what everyone wanted. And I knew what everyone wanted. And when I was teaching, I felt like I pulled the bait and switch on day one, because it's like, no, you aren't getting any of this stuff on day one, right? Before I talk about how to go gather this information and how we can utilize that, we're going to talk about how to do this safely. We're not going to talk about anything kind of like an offensive nature before we talk about how to do these things safely. It's very, very important. When I first started my first OSINT unit, right, I was told we had no budget for equipment, for tools, for training, for anything. I kind of say this half as a joke, half not. One positive about having no budget is that it makes your decisions very, very easy. And you're not worried about, oh, what tool can you use, right? None of them, unless it's free, right? That's one of the reasons why I kind of learned to program a little bit better than I did before. That was, I would need a capability. There was no free tool that had the capability. If there was a commercial tool, I couldn't afford it. And so it was like, well, I either make a tool that has this capability or I do without, right? That does very, very greatly increase your understanding of how things truly work, though. So it ended up being a good thing in the long run. But you learn what matters and how you can accomplish it for free or very, very cheaply, right? What truly matters when it comes to OPSEC for people that are starting up an OSINT unit. And it's important to talk about attribution management, right? What does your web traffic actually look like? And I don't like the term non-attribution, because web traffic looks like it's coming from somewhere, and it doesn't look like it just magically appeared. You look like something. What does it actually look like, and why does it matter, right? Why does it matter what IP address you're using, right? It can be tracked back to you potentially. And it's that your IP address that you're doing can give away potentially what city and state you're in. For me right here, this is kind of a redacted out down there, but this is a Comcast IP address coming out of Tucson, Arizona. I'm currently in Tucson, Arizona, and Comcast is the internet service provider here in my home. And so giving that away to a site, whatever. But what about if you work for a government agency? Your government agency is your service provider. Well, it's a little bit different, right? And giving up this information to Twitter or Facebook may not be that big of a deal, but once you leave major sites like that, giving your IP address to those sites, well, now maybe you need to think, right? Is there someone that's monitoring what I'm doing? Let's not talk about theoretical. Let's talk about an actual, practical, real world thing that happened. We got plenty of those. There was an individual who was doing some bad stuff and thought that, you know what, I may actually be on law enforcement's radar. Law enforcement may be taking a look at me. They were right. And so what they did is on their social media accounts where they had been posting pictures, they did something slightly differently. They posted the pictures, but on another site. They posted a picture on some other site on the internet. And then back on social media, sites like Facebook, Twitter, instead of posting these pictures, they posted links to the pictures, right? Hey, I was just at a party last weekend. Check out these sweet pics, or I just redid my backyard. Check out these sweet pics. But instead of actually posting the pictures on Facebook, it was a link to the pictures elsewhere. And what they were doing is they were monitoring the IP address of everyone that was clicking on those links to see if any law enforcement agencies would. How do we know this? Because this is where the story kind of gets real interesting real quick and real kind of cringeworthy. Is there were law enforcement agencies that were looking at them. They were clicking on those links. They were not managing their attribution. They were seeing these IP addresses come back to these government agencies, and they were actually calling out the government agencies on their social media accounts. Well, looks like this agency's looking at me. Oh, looks like this agency's jumping in there too. They were calling out the agencies that were investigating them because they were not managing their attribution when they were clicking on these links, right? This was a one link shortener. It's called a Grabify. It's similar to like a bit.ly link shortener. And it shows you the IP address of every person that clicks on your link, along with the user agent string. So you can kind of tell what a device they're using. Right? The technology is out there and it's very, very easy to utilize, right? Reasons like this are why it's so important for us to manage our attribution. Right? How do we actually do this, right? What are the best values? Kind of like OPSEC. Well, VPNs are cheap, right? They really, really, truly are. Whenever I talk about VPNs or I see people on social media fairly often ask about what VPN provider they should use, there's a few things I'll say. Number one, pay for it, right? Do not use a free VPN provider. If you actually look at the financials for a lot of the free VPN providers, a ton of them come back to China, which would, number one, kind of be cringy on its own, but it's actually double cringy when you realize that China doesn't allow their own people to use VPNs, but they'll provide a service to other countries to use. So that gets really kind of interesting really quick. A decent number, surprising amount, actually come back with financials tied to Pakistan, at least a couple of years ago, which was kind of crazy. Right? So also free VPNs are just, it's kind of like the cantina from Star Wars, right? It's just a wretched hive of scum and villainy, right? There's a lot of criminals, a lot of kind of undesirables that are using these free VPNs too. And so if you're using that with your accounts, well, now your account's kind of fitting in with them and much more likely to get suspended, right? By sites like Facebook and other social media sites. So it's just generally kind of a bad idea, right? There's this one free VPN provider called Tunnel Bear, and it's kind of cool. It's and they have a paid plan too, but Tunnel Bear has the best graphics of any VPN provider I've ever used, right? You're like, Tunnel Bear, I want to come out of Germany, and there's this cartoon bear that's like, roar, and then he jumps in this green, like, warp tunnel from Super Mario Brothers and comes out a green warp tunnel in Germany on the map. It's great. It's fantastic. And it's a free VPN provider. And I just told you my thoughts about free VPN providers. I remember a couple of years ago, I was in Washington, D.C. at that time, and there was one region where I started seeing report after report after report of our personnel getting accounts suspended, like at a ridiculously high rate. And I had a good friend of mine down in that area that knows what he's doing. So I called down to him and I'm like, Jeremy, like, what in the heck? Right? Like, well, what in the heck's going on down there? And he sighed. And what it was there was another law enforcement organization in that area that had recently put on a free OSINT training, and the instructor for that training had told people, oh yeah, you should use TunnelBear. It's a free VPN provider. It's fantastic. And all of a sudden, all their accounts on these different social media sites had a shelf life of like sour cream at room temperature, right? The accounts were just getting suspended left and right. And so, yeah, pay for it, right? As far as which one you should use a big one that you've heard of. If you tell me use Nord, if you tell me use Proton, I have no problem with that whatsoever. Me personally, the VPN that I use, and I have no financial interest in saying this, I use private internet access. And the reason is they truly keep no logs, right? Other VPN providers have said to keep no logs. And there was one called Hide My Ass, right? Pardon my foul language for half a second there. They said they kept no logs. They got dragged into court in order to produce logs, and Magic said they had logs to produce, right? And we've seen that with kind of a few other providers as well. Private internet access says they have no logs. They have been compelled to produce logs before and have failed to do so every time. But they haven't been jerks about it. They show up and it's like, hey, we have no logs. They actually, within the past like month and a half, they hired Deloitte to do an audit of their systems and actually verify that they have no logs, right? And that's important to me. And the reason it's important to me is it's not that I'm doing anything too illegal, right? Too illegal. I try to minimize the number of felonies I commit at any given day. I say minimize because I'm a realist, but I don't want a record of my stuff out there, right? There was just a VPN provider last year that got popped, and all their data, all their logs are out there, right? And it's out there. It's kind of floating around the breach data ecosystem. And so here are people who are trying to practice good operational security, and now all the real information is floating out there tied to it, right? That's not good. I don't want that, right? Seems like every place eventually is going to get popped. And so I personally choose to use a place that I believe doesn't keep any logs. That's why I use private internet access. Like I said, if you use Proton or use Nord, that's absolutely fine. I think that's just the one that I use, and that's why I use them. Virtual machines can be a very, very kind of cheap, maybe depending on what software you're using, free way to keep your research activities and tools separate from your actual host system, right? Keep the kind of our fake personas as separate as possible from our real ones. And so a VPN or a virtual machine is a fantastic kind of combination of things to use. And then also don't use your real phone numbers, right? Don't use a desk phone number at work. Don't use a phone number that can be tied back to you. Prepaid phones are very, very cheap, right? If we pull up eBay right now and look up prepaid track phone, we can get an Android phone and a year's worth of service for under $100. If you already have an old phone laying around, Mint Mobile SIM cards are what, $15 a month, and they make these 1 week SIM cards for testing to make sure the service works where you live. And they're normally $5, but usually Amazon and Best Buy will have them on sale for like $1. Right, so it's very, very cheap to kind of get a real phone number that we can use to make these accounts on these sites, instead of just using a real phone number that's tied back to us, right? It's very, very difficult sometimes to have good OPSEC retroactively, right? We don't want to, I'm just in a hurry right now, so I just have to do this one thing real quick and it's no big deal. No. Until then, that account that you make ends up getting tied back to you for quite some time. What about these sites like Facebook now, right? And Facebook is fantastic from a security perspective. They truly, truly are. And from a privacy perspective, it's a different thing. But from a security perspective, right, of trying to verify that this is really a real person, right? That it's not just a fake account. And the reason sites do this, they have to, basically, right? They're publicly traded companies. And a huge part of their valuation, right? No one pays for a Facebook account, right? No one pays for a Twitter account. A huge part of the valuation is how many daily active and how many monthly active customers do they have, right? And they don't want to, Twitter is kind of going through it right now with part of the Elon purchase, right? Well, you say you have this many, but I personally believe that a lot of them are bots, so your company is not worth what it is. If you start seeing a drop in those users, the stock price is going to plummet, right? Twitter a few years ago, they went through and they did a bot purge, right? They got rid of about 1 million accounts on their site that they said were bots. The stock dropped almost 20% in one day. Almost 5 billion with a B market valuation lost in one day. And it was because their total number of users dropped, right? They don't want that. And so they try to take these steps to keep the fake accounts off there. And so they have some actual due diligence to say, no, no, we firmly believe that this count that we're telling you investors is actually accurate of real people, not of bots, right? And so one of the things that Facebook kind of led the charge in this is like, hey, you know what? We need you to update and actually upload a picture of yourself, right? And you started seeing this with cryptocurrency places too. I remember when Coinbase, if you wanted to open an account, started requiring you to like take a selfie next to your driver's license. Well, Facebook now will want you to upload a picture, right? And if you try to upload a picture and it's not a real human face, there's a good chance that they're not going to allow that picture, right? There are sites out there like this person does not exist that use it's something called generative adversarial network, GAN. It's an algorithm just that got very, very good at making fake faces. But there are some telltale signs. And the most common telltale sign, if you look at the image on the left on the slide, is the eyes are going to be in perfect alignment, both vertically and horizontally. If you ever go to the this person does not exist page and you put your two fingers over the eyeballs on the page and just keep hitting refresh and refresh and refresh and loading up more faces, you'll never have to move your fingers. Those eyes just stay the same, right? And so we can't use a photo that's made by a site like that. That's probably not going to work. We don't want to use a real photo, right? We don't want to just upload a photo of someone else because reverse image search, right? People can easily figure out that it's not us, that it's someone else. And so what we do a lot of times now is we want to morph, right? We take if you look there on the pictures on the right, the one on the left is a real picture of me. It's from Orlando at Disney World earlier this year. What I did is I took a site, Icons 8. They have a face swapper. It used to be free. Now they want to charge $100 a year, which is kind of annoying. I paid it, but it's kind of annoying. But it let me take a real picture of me, and I've done this on several pictures, and it let me kind of add in characteristics from a fake picture. So if you look at the right, it's similar-ish, right? The same, most of the pictures the same, the scruff, the shirt, you know, the chain, but the face looks a little different, right? Not nearly as handsome. But what this does is, if you look, the eyes and everything are still offset. They're at an angle, right? This is still, even though now this is not a picture of me anymore, I kind of morphed it and added in attributes from a fake picture. Everything that you're going to check this against detects it as a real person, right? Because all these plugins now and all these tools that, oh, we'll detect if this is a real person or not. They're not detecting if it's a real person. They're detecting if it was generated with a site using this generative adversarial networks. The GAN like to have it in Pwn. So since this starts off with a real picture and still has main characteristics of a real picture, it's going to scan as real, right? So just little things like this that we can do even to come up with profile pictures that look extremely real, but it's not any one person, right? And it's going to fly and let us pass some of these checks the social media sites want to put on us. All right. There are some things out there that we can try if we are not allowed to start accounts someplace, right? If by policy we're not allowed to create an accounts. This is if you've ever used Google and you've typed in a page, or excuse me, you typed in some terms that you want to search for, and you're like, oh, there's exactly what I'm looking for on that page right there. And you click on that page, and instead of seeing what you're looking for, you see a prompt to log in. And you're like, well, what the heck? You showed Google this information, but you don't want to show me, right? A lot of sites do that. It's a very, very smart thing to do, because then you want Google to be able to see this information, because that's going to get people to come to your page. But then when anyone not named Google comes to your page, you want them to log in, create an account, and eventually you hope to monetize that. And so what we're doing in this kind of methodology is we're taking advantage of something Google has out there called the Google Mobility Test page. And this is, Google has a site out there that says, hey, if you have a website and you want to see how it looks on a mobile device like an Android, you can come here, give us the website, we'll go look at it and show you what it looks like. Well, think about what we can do now. Now we can have Google go fetch this page and show us what it looks like. This does not always work, right? Some, you see they're using it with the LinkedIn accounts. Some LinkedIn accounts it'll work, some it doesn't, right? Nothing is usually nothing is a substitute for being able to create an account on the site and be able to log in and use it like a normal user. But these are just some things we can try if that's absolutely not an option. So Other options include, right, commercial subscription tools that provides accounts as part of the service. We have those products out there that'll charge you a lot of money, but then they'll have their accounts that they use on sites like Facebook or LinkedIn or other sites that'll let you research. So if you're not allowed to create your own, sometimes you can kind of find a, for lack of a better term, almost a loophole and kind of pay someone else to do it for you, right? Or just flat out outsourcing duties that fall outside the bounds of your company's policies. Like I said, I'll do things like go to the dark web and find some breach data to let people know what of their information is in there because by policy, they're not allowed to do it. All right, we have a short section left on persistent monitoring, but we're almost done. And so let me check out the, how's retirement so far? It was just last week. I don't know. I don't know. It has to be in like a couple months, right? It's been a couple months. So any questions for Matt? A copy. Okay, yeah, it doesn't look like we have anything there. We're good. So let me finish strong here with this persistent monitoring, and then we'll call it a webinar, right? So what is persistent monitoring? And for like private investigators, you don't really maybe care about this too much, right? It's just like, no, a case comes in, I research it, I just go, and that's it. But if you're private sector and actually tasked with protecting a company, right? Or you work for the government, and there's certain criteria that you care about constantly, right? Like if I'm responsible for a specific area, if I have an area of responsibility, I kind of want to know if anything important in that area is going on always, right? So this is one of those things we don't want to do the same searches over and over and over all day. So can we kind of can up that search, right? And just say, hey, monitor this 24/7. If you see anything new, let me know, right? This does not have to cost a lot of money. There are commercial tools that cost six figures that will do a good job of this. If you can duplicate a lot of the functionality, frankly, for free or very, very cheap with a little bit of effort. Google Alerts is free and fantastic, right? And you're allowing a lot of them. If you have a Gmail account, we talk in the SANS OSINT class as far as getting very, very specific with your Google searches for some advanced modifiers. You can get some searches that if this ever hits, if this ever gets a result, it's something that is very, very likely relevant to your interest. You don't have to search that all the time. You can just go to Google and say, hey, if you ever see anything, if you get new results that fit this criteria, shoot me an email, let me know, right? It's free. It's very, very easy to set up. Twitter API keys are free, right? With a little bit of Python code and maybe $3 to $5 a month on kind of web resources or running on a computer locally for free. You can have a 24/7 Twitter bot, right? That's monitoring for certain criteria and shooting you an alert. Like I said, I gave a talk at the 2020 SANS OSINT Summit that I know is on YouTube on persistent monitoring using a methodology like this for Twitter. You can do these things yourself with a little bit of effort. You truly can. And then we have commercial threat intelligence options like Flashpoint that frankly make a lot of sense. If you think about the language skills that you would need to kind of monitor the entire seedy underbelly of the internet and the dark web, and how much kind of a pain in the butt it would be to maintain accounts on all these different sites. It's annoying. It is, right? It makes sense. There's companies out there that would kind of take care of this and then sell, basically put everything in a repository that you can search and sell access to that repository to other people to be able to search, right? Recorded features, another one. I personally like Flashpoint, like the company. I like the people that work there. I have no financial interest to say that, but I've been a big fan of their product for kind of being able to persistent monitor and fire an alert if something really kind of matters to me as well. And why this matters, right? Brand reputation, right? Everyone thinks of protecting the company from a matter of cybersecurity against vulnerabilities, but it's also against legal. It's also against public perception, right? Cloudflare recently took a lot of heat for still providing services to a website that most people thought was reprehensible. And we started to see that, frankly, in the stock valuation, right? It was like, eventually, they had to bail, right? And so it just getting ahead of these things, right? If there's a kind of a groundswell of negative sentiment against your company wants to find out as soon as they possibly can, right? So they can start to deal with that. They can try to mitigate that. Executive protection, right? If certain, if you have an executive or some type of public persona for your organization that gets a lot of hate mail, a lot of threats, certain things like that, and their home address gets posted online, you probably want to know about that as soon as you possibly can, right? So these are, once again, ideas for things that we want to monitor and be aware of. Potential insider threats, both intentional or I have seen a ton of unintentional, right? People giving away sensitive information unintentionally. Right? Either social engineering or just blindly, giving information away. And you can tell it's not on purpose, but still organizations get popped because of that type of information. And then we're seeing more and more initial access for sale, right? This is places that basically get footholds on systems and they start kind of stealing all the information going across that computer, and they start getting things like people's cookies and authentication tokens for websites. And so even if I don't have your password, it doesn't matter. If I have this cookie in a valid session, I can just take that cookie, present it as my own, and now I'm logging as you, right? And so more and more now we're seeing places get popped where how the attackers actually got in there is they went to a broker that sells these types of things, and it's like, hey, here's the money in Bitcoin, however we're doing this. And now you just basically gave me a cookie that's automatically going to log me into this network. Right? We're seeing more and more things like that. Once again, it's important to be aware of what's out there and try to monitor this for proactive defenses. And that's it. So thank you all very much. I figured this would take about an hour. It's 10:57, so the timing was about spot on. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat right now. I am, you see there, Matt0177 on Twitter. Feel free to hit me up on there with any questions you have. You see my email right there, matt@orgaliuslabs.com. Like I said, if you have any questions, let me know. I'll check the chat here real quick. And thank you, David. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Yeah. No, if you have any questions, like I said, let me know. And otherwise, thank you very much, Emily, for setting this up and giving me a chance to kind of share this deck that I put together for a different audience last month with a little bit of a wider audience.
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for this presentation and for bringing this information to the SANS community. It was really great stuff. I learned some stuff that, I'm not going to be doing any of this, but it's always nice to learn a little bit more about what you all do. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all of our upcoming and on-demand SANS webcasts, please visit sans.org/webcast. Definitely keep an eye out there and on the Cyber Defense Twitter or LinkedIn pages. Matt's definitely going to be sharing some more information and hopefully some workshops in the future. With that, take care, and we hope to have you back again for another SANS webcast soon. Thanks, everyone.
You all for the kind words. Appreciate it. Have a great day.